name's Bonnie.
I'm Caroline.
And I'm Collette.
Have you ever wondered, why do people even begin or start YouTube channels? I know some people don't like them at all, and some people use them all the time. Why or what motivates people to begin one? Maybe you've even wondered, why did we start our YouTube channel, Recovering Your Voice? Well, today we're going to answer that question, and then we're going to also have you think about being on the show. Why do you think it's important to share your story? So we're going to debunk some of the excuses and tell you some of the reasons, 10 reasons why we think telling your story is so important. But first, Carol Ann's agreed to give her interpretation of why did we start Recovering Your Voice?
Well, when I think back on it, to me, I believe that, as happens with all of us, we were having dreams and talking about those dreams to each other and talking about what God was saying to the three of us. And we believed that God was saying he wanted to create something special with the three of us working together. And what came out of that was a very special, what we refer to as triple braided cord. And that triple braided cord is the three of us, but as well as our relationship together. God showed me that he wanted us to work almost like together in a test kitchen. And you may have heard us even refer to that before, our test kitchen. And so the more that we talk together very quickly, the Lord put it together that what he was looking for was for us to work together on sharing stories, exactly what we're talking about today, not just our stories, but people's stories. Why? We believe that hearing people's stories will benefit people who need to hear those stories.
Let's begin with a quote about stories and their importance. This one's from Brene Brown, who if you've watched any of our YouTube videos before, we've mentioned her. So this is what she says. We're wired for story. In a culture of scarcity and perfectionism, there's a surprisingly simple reason we want to own, integrate, and share our stories of struggle. We do this because we feel the most alive when we're connecting with others and being brave with our stories. It's our biology. So today we're going to give an excuse that we often hear for people not wanting to share their stories, and then a reason that we think you should share your stories.
Excuse number one, stories are just for kids.
Reason number one for sharing your story is we share our story because everyone loves a good story. If you think about stories, stories have been in our culture, in society forever. Think back to the parables of Jesus in the Bible. Jesus used stories. First Nation people, they used stories to give and pass on their beliefs to the next generation. Think about bedtime stories with your children. Last thing you do with them before they go to bed. Stories are all around us. Carol Ann, I think you have a good story about that.
Stories have been very important to me. Years ago, I shared on an earlier program, I believe, where as a young wife and a young mom, and newly moved away from my family, from home. So I was essentially alone in a city with my husband in a new job and away from home a lot. I was listening every day to stories. And this was on a program where people were being interviewed and they were sharing their experience in their lives and how God made a difference. And I listened to those stories every day for about 2 months. And then I thought, why don't I try what they're talking about? And so I called up. But all of that to say, and that was the beginning of a whole new approach to life for me, and peace and joy and a new life. So for me, I knew that it was necessary for me to hear the stories, and it is in my culture from Newfoundland and Labrador. We grew up with stories. So I believe the same thing, that just as I'm looking, and I was looking as a young woman for how to help myself, and I looked to other people's stories, I believe it's the same today, that as we have other folks share their stories, that those stories will help people out there who are going through the same thing and need to hear that story.
Excuse number 2. My story isn't anything special.
Reason number 2, sharing your story is inspirational. Trust that you are qualified to share because we've all lived through something. Avoid letting fear become a stumbling block. Wear your scars proudly. Others can learn from your story in both good ways and bad. You can be an inspiration. Your bravery may be the motivation for others to step out and share their struggles. Your story could transform another life by offering guidance for navigating difficult situations. I think Bonnie has a story to share with us here.
When you hear somebody's story, you can might have well, someone sounds like me and talks like me. When you read a story, you may read, wow, somebody has the same thoughts as me. When you hear someone's inspirational story, you may say, someone out there has a similar story to me. I'm not alone. I had something happen to me. Part of my story was a life-changing experience in 2019. Perhaps on another show, I'll share that. But as a result of that, I wrote a book. And one of my dearest comments back that I received from a reader of my book was this: I can't thank you enough for giving a name to what I'm going through. That's what stories do for us. When we share, they give a name to what we're experiencing. That's inspirational.
Okay, excuse number 3. Who wants to hear my story?
Reason number 3 for sharing your story is that sharing your story is empowering. Telling our story helps us to remember. We can remember how far we've come in healing. It allows reflection on how remarkable our life has been. We remember what we've been through, and we can stand back in amazement that we survived it. It can be very empowering, even if you just write it out for yourself, because you realize there's purpose in our pain. It can empower others to be persistent, that they're through their trials in life just by hearing yours. And it can stimulate conversation that maybe normally others or ourselves have never talked about. Collette has a story for us about this.
I was definitely excuse number 3. Who wants to hear my story? Bonnie has always encouraged me to share my story. And I would always say back to her, I didn't want to live it. I don't think anybody wants to hear it. And she explained, like she just did for our audience and me again, that there's power in sharing your story. You're bringing, in my case, sometimes light to darkness, sometimes the hiding in shame. By sharing my story with somebody was inviting them to come closer to my heart. Depending how close I wanted them is depending how deep I shared my story with them one-on-one. So sharing invites you to have fellowship or a connection with somebody else. And it shows us that we can be real and still loved. We don't have to be perfect. We can show our garbage and have people say, wow, look how far you've come. And Bonnie has always reminded me of how far I've come in life, from what was to what is. And for that, I'm very thankful. I have been really enjoying Brené Brown's work lately. And the reason why I've been enjoying it so much is she entered my story. And my story, in a previous episode, I shared about the gifts of the pandemic being sent to my room, was that God called me to a deeper transparency and authenticity. And I didn't know what all that meant, but I knew when it was his voice, I listened. And then all of a sudden, I came into Brené Brown's work. Now, I've been sent things earlier, but I guess my heart wasn't ready to receive this teaching. But when I started reading and listening to Brené Brown's work, I realized she was validating my story first, that the Spirit of God had told me to be authentic and real, and why it was so important. So just like, in the old days when people would have like, a mentor or something, I've been enjoying walking through her story because it was validating my story. So we were meeting in the middle. So if I quote Brené Brown a bit too often around you, have a little grace and enter into my story. How's that? Here's another quote from Brené Brown. You either walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside your story and hustle for worthiness. Brené Brown. I've hustled all my life to change into what I thought the person wanted in front of me to be. I've now come to realize that if I have to compromise who I am to become what you want, you really don't want to know me.
Excuse number 4. My life is private. I don't want to air my dirty laundry.
Reason number 4, sharing your story brings connection. If you want to connect with me, don't talk about the weather. Tell me how it's affecting your arthritis. I'd rather hear that than a weather report. Let's dare to go deeper and be more authentic with each other. And airing dirty laundry, my friends don't mind my dirty laundry. Actually, I've had some come in and help me clean some of it. So it causes a deeper connection with each other, but a deeper connection to who we really are, and that we're accepted in who we really are. It's trusting our friends with our stories. Again, another Brené Brown quote, Vulnerability is the only bridge to build connection with others. And Bonnie would like to build a bridge with us.
My grandmother was the poster child for not airing your dirty laundry. She believed that you did not talk about anything, especially public, but also privately. I had the opportunity to speak with my aunt, my mother's sister, the only one left living, recently, and she described the household that she grew up with her mom, my grandmother, having this code of silence. And she said that she would rather have a house that exposed everything than living in a house of silence where nothing was discussed. I hadn't realized that I had grown up with some of that in me. I grew up with the model that I had to be strong, I had to be perfect, I had to be right, and I was not allowed to show any weakness. And that's not the right way to grow up. So as a result of that, there were many complications in my life. And I realized that by not being real, by not sharing my struggles, by not asking for help, I was isolating myself. I was cutting myself off from others that could come alongside of me in my life. And so sharing your story, reaching out, telling somebody else your questions, your concerns, your celebrations. It can be good or bad. Having those times in life and sharing them with others is so important. And it creates community and it creates, most of all, connection.
Excuse number 5. My story doesn't have a happy ending yet.
Reason number 5, sharing our story creates community.
This is the excuse that I hear most often from others when I ask, would you like to be on Recovering Your Voice and share your story? Many people have the impression that they can only share their story if they've gone through something and end up with a happy ending at the end. We like, as a society, to tie things up with a pretty bow at the end. I know for me, if I watch a TV show or if I watch a movie, if I read a book, I want all the details to come together and it to give me that satisfying ending. But that's not how life works. We are all usually either at the beginning of going through something, at the end of something, but there's that important middle of something. We haven't yet arrived to our destination. And that's so important to create community. We can then say that we understand, we can come alongside others when we hear that story. Or we can say, you know, I've been there also. And you feel a connection, as we've already spoken about. This became really powerful to me. And this is years ago. I remember watching for the very first time a movie with Robin Williams in it called Mrs. Doubtfire. Perhaps you watched it as well. And spoiler alert, I'm going to share the ending, but you know, it's been around since almost 30 years. So you had lots of opportunity to watch it for yourself. But I was watching it on TV. I think it was released in 1993, and this was several years after. And I had already gone through my divorce. And when I watched that show, and it didn't bring the couple back together at the end, it wasn't the happy ending that we were expecting. And by hearing that story, it validated to me that sometimes things don't work out the way we expect, but they still came to an agreement. They still came to a reconciliation of sorts. The family survived. And by watching that, I made the connection. It created community for me. It validated my own life. And then even though life doesn't meet our expectations, doesn't have the happy ending, I was still going to be okay. So just by watching that story in a movie, it created a great community for me.
Excuse number 6. But my story is different from everyone else's.
Reason number 6, sharing your story creates awareness or raises awareness. When we share our story, we might hear something that we don't normally think about, or we have no relationship to, or we might even have bias against it. When we hear someone else's story, we grow in empathy, we can grow in compassion because we hear their heart. We need to hear other stories to challenge our own thinking, which is often wrong thinking. It exposes issues that others might not even be aware of. Now, it sounds crazy, but one of our favorite commercials or favorite YouTube videos on recovering your voice for us is, yeah, I'm going to say it, it's a beer commercial. It's called This New Heineken Ad is Brilliant. And we will put it in the link below for you to view it. But it shows the importance of sharing your story so well in this beer commercial. But Collette is also going to share another story for us. Collette.
If we can share our story with someone who responds with empathy and understanding, shame cannot survive. Again, Brene Brown. I went through a journey of love conquers false judgment, false teaching. The issues become a person, and in the overflow of that truth, you open your eyes and your heart to a new understanding to truth. And this cannot be demonstrated stronger than when I was able to enter into a story with one of my friends. And she was sharing her heart about her son's same-sex attraction. And I love with all my heart her son. So I entered into the story not with my head, but with my heart too. And it shifted in me. It shifted in me that what I thought was, I had to challenge and say, he's still the same person. I still love him dearly. So much so that later on when I was speaking to my son commented it on my attitude adjustment. Let's just call it attitude adjustment. And I said, Bud, it's now a person, not a political agenda. I love this person. Love conquers all. And I'm just going to enter into this relationship on love. So yeah, when I hear stories that challenge my house of cards and bring them down, I need to look and be willing, because out of a posture of love, be willing, like Jesus with the woman that committed adultery. He entered her story and did not cast stones, but said, whoever has no sin, cast the first stone. And trust me, when he leaned in that sand and wrote things, I am sure he had a few things to say about Collette. If anybody is a regular viewer on this channel, you would have noticed that we are free to share our stories. And that's the only story that we should be free to share. When another person is involved in our stories, we don't have to name names to make our story validated. We just have to share our part of the story and say he, she, a nephew, a cousin, whatever. be mindful of confidentiality and respect for when somebody shares their story with you, because they are giving you the greatest treasure they can give you. It's almost like they're handing you part of their diary. So be safe with it. Be mindful of that. And to be honest, if they are sharing your stuff or you're sharing somebody's stuff, chances are your stuff's not safe with them either.
Excuse number 7. I'll be judged if I share my story.
Reason number 7, share your story because only you have lived your story. Believe and be encouraged that your story matters. Even if someone has experienced a similar situation to you, the details involved in their story and how God moved and the victories and so on are and could be drastically different than your own. You can inspire others to take action, to make changes, and to break stigmas. There is a chance that we're going to be rejected or judged when we share our story. But that's true of every decision, everything that we do in life. Only you, though, have lived your life. That is your truth. And only you can tell your story. And it matters. And Collette has a story for us about this. Collette?
Oh, for a very long time, I had struggles to share my stories from the past. Like I said to Bonnie, I didn't want to live it. Why would I want to share it? However, in my stories of the past, I lost my voice when I was a child. And I'm not saying physically, I'm saying when I tried to share my stories with people that weren't ready for hearing what I had to share, I was not believed. And that can damage a person deeply. As I grew and started owning my story and sharing it with people that are like heart people, bridge people, as Brene Brown says, marble people. Go look that one up. I shared my story again. And I was heard and believed this time. And that gave me the courage to show up authentically with this person next time we connected. And it was such a gift to be believed this time. Now, I'm not shaming those that didn't believe. They were so far in their story that they couldn't go further. No judgment here, people, no judgment. I'm saying that we need to find people we can share a story with so we can own it and know we are still lovable. We're still accepted. You know, we still have value. There's a great object lesson of, holding a $50 bill saying, who wants it? And, the audience go, yeah, yeah. And then you crumple it, stamp on it, dirty it up a bit. And then you pick it up and go, who still wants it? Well, yeah, there's still value. But the value is put on people receiving it. So sharing your story is the bravest thing you're ever going to do. It is. I'm telling you, it's not for the faint of heart. Choose, open your heart to a person. And as you open it gradually, you'll know if you go to the next level. I'm not expecting to share deep what I shared with this person on here yet, because I don't know who my audience is. I'm being honest with you guys. But you guys know out there in my audience, stories I've shared with you too. And you know why I shared it with you, because you earned the right to hear the deep on deep. And here we go again, another Brene Brown quote, okay? One day You will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will become someone else's survival guide. Brene Brown.
Excuse number 8. Sharing my stuff is uncomfortable.
Reason number 8, sharing our story gives permission to others. When we share our story, it gives others the courage to share theirs. It may be uncomfortable for a time, but it will have a lasting impact. If we only share the good stuff in our lives, we become another, Facebook or Instagram highlight. This is not representative of what real life is. And we can get into comparison. We can get into downing our own lives. So Collette's back to share her thoughts on giving permission to others to share their story.
Sharing your story does give permission for others to enter into their story, but somebody has to lead the way. Somebody has to be the first one to be brave enough to do it. Who's going to be that somebody? And sharing your story is empowering because it takes back our power. For me to share my story took me out of victim mode into victorious mode. My dad insisted on naming me Collette. I wasn't sure why, but he insisted, and that's another story. But in saying that, later on years in life, I looked up what my name meant. And my name means victorious. So now when I share my story with my safe people, I take my power. I am not victimized. I am not powered over by, because every form of victimization is about a power trip. Every form. You go to the root, it's a power trip. So when I share my story, I'm inviting the light into the darkness of these stories. And it is so much brighter that the darkness has to go. And what I mean by this is there's like a parable that Jesus says in the Bible about when a Roman soldier insists you carry his pack for a mile. That was a law back then, and trust me, they were not treated well by some of the Roman soldiers. We could say probably victimization was involved. And Jesus says to them, I say, don't just carry the 1 mile, pick it up and carry another mile. And my fairness just rose up, and me and Creator God had a little talk about this. And he explained to me that the first mile you have no control over. It is being what's done to you. But that second mile is your empowering trip to pick up that pack and walk it. That's inviting light into darkness. That is taking back your power. And darn it, people, I want my power back. I've been stolen from long enough, and I'm receiving my power back. Try it. It's empowering. Excuse number 9. My story is not exciting.
Reason number 9, sharing our story can be therapeutic. Each of us has a unique story to share, and sharing our story can be a very healing opportunity for us. Often there's a release of emotions as we share our story. It allows us to let go sometimes of the past and to move forward. And as we dissect our stories, even preparing to tell our stories, you might see a need for forgiving others in your past. You might see harmful patterns that you created. You might notice even a divine protection as you look through your story in your life. And in the end, you might have gratefulness for all the good things that have happened. So sharing our story can have make sense, help us to make sense of the events in our life. And Carol Ann has a great story about this for us.
Well, I definitely relate to my story is not exciting because probably being an introvert, I choose to, if I speak last. I like to hear what everyone else is saying first, and then speak. But I look at myself or consider myself to be not a dynamic speaker. So I've even had occasions where people have invited me to speak to women or groups, and I've tried to talk them out of it because I say I'm not a dynamic speaker. But that's okay. When I did say yes, and I did share about some key things, key struggles that I had that ended up being very close to what the conference was about. And it meant that my experience and my struggle helped to demonstrate to the audience what God was talking about. And I'm not saying that that I shared something good about my decision making or my experience. It's the opposite. And actually, our experience as believers teaches us that it's better to share the struggles, share the bad, and hold the good, because it helps us as human beings. And I believe that it's the teachings of Jesus to go opposite to the ones who donated and wanted to shout it from the rooftops, look at what I gave. And Jesus' teaching is no, don't even let it be known. Keep it, hold it, because it's better to the good things that you do, keep them close. But it is important to share our struggles, share behaviors that we recognized were wrong, like judging others and things like that. And then when we recognize that was wrong, and I've learned that, it's really good to share that with others because it helps them to learn too, that this is something that we are falling into. It's like a ditch, and God wants to help us out of it. And we are helped out when we hear someone share the story of falling into the ditch, but recognizing and receiving the help to get out. So we may not be a dynamic comedian when we share the story, but our stories are really important. Excuse number 10.
My voice is not important.
Reason number 10, sharing your story helps recover your voice. I have a quote here from Leslie Leland Fields, and she wrote a story called Your Story Matters. She says, your stories are bigger and more important than you know right now. bring them out from the dark, from silence into words and voice. And when we were creating this YouTube channel, of course, we had to come up with a name. So we brainstormed, we sought God, we thought, what do we call this? And we had many, many ideas, some of them which we Googled and found out others had the same idea, so we couldn't use it. But we came up with and really felt God saying it wasn't to find our voices, because we were each born with a voice. And I'm not talking about our physical voice. We each have a story. And it wasn't about finding it because it was there. It was about recovering it. And that's why we came up with this name, Recovering Your Voice. And we truly, really believe each of us has a story to tell. If today on the show you were inspired to share your story, then we want to encourage you to do so. Not just on the show, but with each other, with that friend that comes and maybe discloses something. We ask you have grace, you have compassion, and that you listen and hear them. If you're the person that wants to share, we pray that you do it confidentiality in mind, that you only share your stuff. We're not about shaming. We're not about gossip. We are about our own stories. So we would encourage you, if you want to share on this platform, to write us at recoveringyourvoice@gmail.com. And until next time, keep sharing your stories.
Yeah.
Before I forget, put the recording button on.
Sorry, Carol Ann.
No, it's fine.
You can just, ad lib it.
I think that it would be easier at this point for me to read what you've provided.
That's okay.
Vive la différence, people. Vive la différence.
Okay.
Excuse.
I had a real struggling, sorry. Did that work? Did that come across?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Very.
Okay.
God cares about my heart, not my spelling or my. We're sharing beer commercials here.
Heineken, is that how you would pronounce that beer?
Are you going to say it, Bonnie?
Yes, I am.
Okay, then I don't have to worry about pronouncing it.
I'm just
Okay,
asking
and the
you
other-
girls if you think that's how you say it. Yeah.
I think so, eh?
Heineken?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it, Caroline?
Yes.
Let's ask the expert on our panel. I'm kidding, Caroline.
I'm the beer expert.
Kidding, okay? That was just for fun.
I don't even like beer.
No, that's why I'm saying it for fun.
Preach it, girl. Preach it. Reason number 9.
No, it's
No?
in the camera. I can only see the white paper in the camera.
Oh, okay. Okay. Here we go, girls. We've been proven wrong more than once.
Oh my gosh, people. I have my own chair there.
I mean, it's a passion, right? It's a passion of mine. Share your story. Tell your story.
Bibbidi bobbidi. Excuse number 10.
Bibbidi Bobby. My voice is not important.
Okay, we don't have to do the bibbidi bobbidi because we're on gallery right now.
Oh, that's rich.
Ah,
So we're going to do that again.
Technical issues on line 4. Bonnie! Hey, mom and pail, please.
But it was cute watching you guys do it.